Hello, Mrs. Below here. In this video, I'm just going to briefly go over the different parts of a cell. I know that this picture can seem a little overwhelming, and you don't have to know all these parts right now. Eventually, we will get into these in a little bit more detail later in the semester. But I just want to point out a few things. So these two cells right here, a plant cell, which is what plants are made up of, and an animal cell. These are both eukaryotes. So these are cells that have a nucleus. So nucleus is the structure that you can see in the middle, and that's where the DNA is going to be found. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and we will talk more about that later in the semester. But essentially, DNA is genetic material. It is stuff that can be passed on to offspring, and it's essentially the blueprints or the instructions that tells the cell what to do. So every single cell, as you saw in the notes, has DNA. Okay, so every single cell will have DNA. And in this bacteria cell, this is a prokaryote, and it doesn't have DNA. And you're like, well, you just said the DNA is found in the nucleus, and this doesn't have a nucleus. That's why it's a prokaryotic cell or a prokaryote. It still has DNA. It just is not encased in a nucleus. It's just floating around in this central area of the bacteria cell. So that's number one thing that all cells have is DNA. The second thing is going to be a cell membrane. Now, a cell membrane, this is just the thing that surrounds the cell. Okay. Let's see, in this one, it's also called the plasma. It might also be called the cell membrane as well. Excuse me, this plasma membrane. A cell wall, that's something that you're going to see that might be extra in a cell in addition to that plasma membrane. But all cells have a cell membrane or a plasma membrane. That's the thing that surrounds it. And in these diagrams here, you can see it's kind of like that orangey, yellowy looking thing that surrounds the cell. Okay. So that's the second thing that all cells have. It's the cell membrane. And then the last thing that all cells will have is the cytoplasm, which you can see here, it's labeled in all of these. The cytoplasm is just this, it's the stuff, this jelly-like substance that fills the cell. Now you can see in both the animal and the plant cell that they have a lot of these other things going on inside of them. All these other little colored things. Those are called organelles, okay? So all these other things that you're seeing inside, they're technically floating in the cytoplasm, and they're called organelles, which is literally a tiny organ. And we'll get more into that later in the semester, but you'll notice a bacteria cell doesn't really have as many organelles. It's very simple, but it still has cytoplasm. So those are the three main things that you're going to have to know for now in terms of the structure of a cell.